Hi people, welcome back to my YouTube. It is your girl Honey. Welcome back people, welcome back. And those of you who are new here, welcome to my channel. It is your girl Honey. So those of you who are new here, please check out my website honeysastro.com should you wish to visit and see what other astrology things I have on my website. Okay, so first of all, I have an eyelash hanging off my face and I do apologize if it is distracting you, especially the Venus in Virgos. I know, I'm sorry I have not come completely prepared today, I know, but I'm trying my best. It's literally just hanging off right now, and it's just irritating me. I can't even take it off because the other one is on perfectly fine. Anyway, people, we are talking a little bit about Saturn in the 12th house today. We are continuing on with the Saturn through the houses series. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Saturn. Saturn is your rules, regulations, restrictions, responsibilities, self-limitations, and fears. The 12th house is your unconsciousness, your escapism, solitude, isolation, fears. It's the house of karma, past life, other realms, sleep, dream, isolation, institutions, hospitals, jails, mental health, your unconsciousness. This is an extremely deep house and a lot of you guys have been asking for this specific video. So I'm a 12th house specialist. I do specialize in decoding the 12th house so you guys can completely understand what it means, because if you look at every other house, right, every other house is very clear. The first house, this is how I look, my appearance, my persona, how I look at the world. The second house, my possessions, my money. Third house, my communities, my siblings, my speech. Fourth house, my family, my home, my roots. Everything is pretty clear. You can pretty much see and understand those houses, but the 12th house, how do you grasp it? And this is where a lot of people get very confused. So check out my 12th house series. I will link it up here so you guys can watch that after the video, watch all the way through. So in this video, we are going to be talking about Saturn natal, Saturn transit, and Saturn return through the 12th house. So let's talk a little bit about Saturn in the 12th house natally. When you think about the 12th house, I'm always linking it to, you know, our moments before our birth. The coming months before our birth. The closer Saturn is towards the ascendant, we are seeing that there is a lot of anxiety that you have about being back in the world, because this is all about reincarnation. Once it comes to your actual birth, we do see that mum is really struggling. She's really struggling. It can be a complicated birth, but most of the time it tends to be a very long birth. So we can see that your mum could have been in labour for like 24 plus hours, just a really long birth. And a lot of this is usually down to the fact that you are very anxious about coming into the world because you know what's happened to you previously. When you look into past lives, right? When Saturn comes into the 12th house, there's usually a lot of fear that you are bringing into this life, or the feeling of fear becomes very familiar. Being incarcerated, being kind of enclosed, and this is the house of hotels, of jails, of institutions, being institutionalized. And what we find typically is people who have Saturn in their 12th house natally may have come from a past life where they may not have been able to have a lot of freedom. I also look at it as being like a health issue, like a chronic health issue or a disability, something that may have prevented you from walking out that door, from going out and being free to do the things that you truly want to do. And that's why now in this lifetime, it feels a little too familiar to just stay in your room or stay in your home, because this is a way that you are going to control your environment. Because in your past life, you were so used to the fact that someone else controlled your environment. You were punished, you were told that you can't do this or you can't do that. And that's why being in your own space, it just feels natural, it feels normal, because you've done it all before. But this time, Saturn links us to control. There's more of a feeling of, well, you want to be in control of your life now. Not through your eyes or the hands of someone else, because you may have broken a rule, a law. You may have been ill, you may have been sick. And that's why this time, you want to control your own space, because the outside world can be a little bit too chaotic for you. And being in your own space, yeah, I can control this here. Think about moments where we love smelling flowers, we love music, we love things that give us pleasure, because Saturn is the governor and he's there to restrict and hold things. And what we find is those little pieces of pleasure that we really love to have, Saturn in the 12th house people tend to restrict that. There can be, I don't want to say you guys are mean, because you guys aren't mean people, not to anybody else, because you guys are far from mean to anybody else, intentionally anyway. But you can be very mean to yourself, you know? So we do see someone who may feel like, okay, I've had too much fun now. I want to just, you know, keep myself to myself. I'm listening to too much music. I'm having too much fun. Something's not right, you know? So there can be a familiar feeling of, I need to stop myself. I need to control what's going on in my environment. Saturn also represents endings, and we associate the 12th house and obviously the 8th house in terms of death, okay? And, you know, look to see where your body's birthmark is. What part of your body is your birthmark? That can also indicate how you may have passed away in your previous life. What may have happened to you in your previous life. When Saturn comes into the 12th house, it's almost like it's kind of pushing you to experience a little bit more pain. Now, when I say pain, I don't mean like physical pain, like someone's just stabbing your arm. I mean like, that feeling of like, I feel down, or I feel low, or I feel like there's a blocked feeling around me. I feel blocked, I feel restricted. I mean pain like that, psychological pain. And this is the last piece of pain that you are going to experience, because in your next life, okay, there won't be that heavy pain of Saturn anymore. But when it comes into this 12th house, it's asking you to finish up a few things that you didn't quite finish in your past life. Even in terms of our families, you know, Saturn also represents authoritative figures, and it can link us to our dads, our parents even. And there's usually some sort of heavy burden that you're feeling as you're growing in your mum's womb. You're feeling that me coming into the world, is it the right time for me to come into the world? Are my parents financially prepared for me? Are my parents even responsible? Or have they got too much responsibilities that's going to prevent them from parenting me how I need them to? All of these thoughts that go through your mind unconsciously as a fetus, as a baby growing in the womb, right? And this is why it takes a very long time for you to be birthed, because there's so much anxiety and fear that you are carrying with you in this life, so it always feels like a burden. And that's why you'll hear a lot of people say, you're like an old soul, like an old school person, because they recognize within you that you are bringing a lot of old school vibes into this lifetime. There's something old school about you. So we can also see that, you know, there can be a restriction in terms of your relationship with your dad. Dad may not be in your life how he is supposed to be. He can be incarcerated. He can have mental health issues. He can be an escapist. He may just go off and he may have just had another family. But when it comes into this 12th house, there's just a restricted relationship with dad. And it gives you a very sour taste in your mouth in terms of people who are in authority, because your parents are your first form of authority in our lives, right? The relationship, or the lack thereof, with dad in terms of authority, you know, guidance even, and governing, because it's in that 12th house and you didn't have it like how maybe other people may have had it. When you go into authority, like when you go into school, you've got teachers who represent Saturn, authoritative figures. You go into the outside world, you've got police officers, government officials. You go into work, you've got managers. There will always be someone who has a level of authority in your life. And what we find is that you look up to these people. People who have a level of authority somewhere, somehow in their life, you aspire to have that. And you tend to idolize those types of people because you lacked it so much in your childhood. In your adult life, you tend to idolize a lot of those people. And sometimes as well, because the 12th house is linked to suppressed energy and Saturn is fears, there can be a sense of fear on your own with becoming an authoritative figure yourself. So you may fall into many moments in your life where you're feeling like, oh my God, like, you would rather be below somebody. So someone's always governing what you're doing in terms of work. You might choose to stay working below someone instead of being your own entrepreneur, or instead of kind of managing your own business, whatever it might be. There just might be that fear of you becoming the authoritative figure yourself. And that's why when you escape from the outside world and you go back into isolation and you're on your own, this is where you become the authority. This is where you feel like, yes, I can govern my room, I can govern my house, I can live how I want to in this place, I can be on my own. Because the outside world is where you're so used to everyone else taking charge. And when you think about it, what's so deep? Saturn is a generational planet. It takes about 2.5 years to go through each individual sign. So if you go back to school, all of the people in your class, the year below, the year above, whatever it might be, the people around you, their Saturn can very easily fall into your 12th house. So these people are going to be used to offloading a lot of baggage onto you, which feels so heavy. And usually it's going to be in terms of them kind of governing how you go about your life. So it's always a heavy feeling from other people. The 12th house can also be linked to sacrificing. When Saturn comes in here, we do see someone who may choose to sacrifice themselves to help other people. There's a sense of burden, like there's that heavy burden feeling, that guilty feeling of I have to help someone. And at some point in their lives, they may feel obligated. It's an obligation that they must be there to help that person. It can be like a sick parent, a sick grandparent. It can be sick people. It can be old people in a home. Saturn is also the elderly as well. And what we find is when Saturn comes in here, there's just this feeling of, okay, I need to step forward. And because this is becoming your environment, you know, you're going to be used to wanting to help and heal people. It becomes your environment. You may need some support from others. It's like if you're caring for someone who's sick and you have 2 kids, you know, who are also a little bit ill. You know, you're working 40 hours a week, you know, you've got a lot of responsibilities. You might still feel like you want to take on board more because you feel guilty not having any. So if someone is sick and it feels like it's your job to kind of be there, you're going to be there. And if other people try and say, look, you know, you've got to ask for help, you know, I'll help you, I'll get you a carer. A carer is someone who comes in and who does the things that you may not be able to do for that sick person. And typically when Saturn comes into the 12th house, they feel guilty getting a carer. So they take on board more responsibilities. And what happens is there's almost this fear of letting go, a fear of surrendering, allowing other people to come in and do your job as good as you or even better than you, who knows, but there's just that fear of letting go because Saturn likes to be in a place of control and also being able to govern. And I can't lie, you know, I'm a Capricorn moon myself, and if it ever came down to me having to put someone into care, I'm going to make sure that I'm protecting the person who I care about by having cameras. Yes, because you hear too much of those stories, you know, about children or your parents, grandparents, when they're sick and they're in a nursing home or whatever, and they're being abused. I have not got time for that. I'm putting cameras in their rooms. If it ever came down to that, I'm going to put cameras. And that can be a way of you kind of being in control-ish, okay, behind the scenes, right? I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the story of Gypsy Blancard. and her mother I think I'm pronouncing the names correctly. I'm British, that's my excuse. Gypsy Blancard, Dee Blancard. But there is an amazing documentary about them on Netflix. Make sure you guys check it out, okay? Just to summarize the story, the mum, Dee Blancard, was a physician or worked in a pharmacy previously, and she was able to kind of get these drugs and stuff for her daughter. Her daughter was absolutely healthy. There was nothing wrong with her daughter. Now, Dee had a mental health condition called, I think it's pronounced Munchausen syndrome. And this is when you have this need to have to care for someone. You feel like I have to look after someone. I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to be there. But to do that, that person may not be sick. So her disorder led for her to give her child, I can't remember exactly what she was feeding Gypsy, but she was giving her these things that would keep her very sick, you know? And both of them lied to the media, to their neighbors. It was such a big deal, because how it ended was Gypsy, actually I won't ruin it for you guys. If you don't know, just go and watch it. It's an amazing documentary. But my point is, when you have Saturn placed in your 12th house, you might experience Munchausen disorders, a disorder where you feel that you need to kind of care for someone. And that's in the most extreme case, by the way. Not everyone's gonna relate to that, of course. But there might be a need for you to have to want to care for someone. Even if someone's not really sick, it's just giving you a sense of responsibility and something to do. And even in terms of Gypsy, who was the child who was taking all of these medications that would make her sick, even with her, in her next life, she then has Saturn placed in her 12th house because she was stuck. She was institutionalized in her home, confined to a wheelchair. Even though actually, I think in the documentary, she was witnessed to walk by the neighbors sometimes or whatever, but she was always confined to be in a wheelchair. So there's lots of things like that to look into in terms of like Saturn being in that 12th house. In terms of the emotions as well, this is a very intense emotional house. It's a water house, right? So when Saturn comes into this house, there can be a restriction. When Saturn comes in here, it can make it difficult for you to even know the real authentic you. Therefore, it makes it harder for others to understand who you really are. And that's why when it comes to, you know, like breakups, for example, you might choose to just let something, you may not feel comfortable just saying to someone, oh, I feel like I'm in love with you. I'd hate for us to end it now. And there could just be a fear of being completely emotionally vulnerable. And you guys are very good at holding how you truly feel in here. And that's the thing, when Saturn comes in here, it's really important that you guys are learning to release the energy, because the older you get, the better things are over time. In terms of Saturn transit and even Saturn return, going through the 12th house, there are going to be some pros and some cons, but let's talk about the pros first. You might learn more about rituals. You might want to protect your space so much more than you was before. And by doing that, you might want to spend more time alone. I also look at the 12th house as traveling. It's more so like astral traveling, but there may be a strong need for you to want to just book a flight, you know, and just go somewhere on your own. Go on a holiday by yourself. Move to a different country on your own. But there is a need to just be on your own when Saturn comes into this house, but you're taking accountability. There's also a lot of deep diving, and I always say look at your 23rd year in terms of annual perfections, your 11th year, 23rd year, 35th year. Anyway, those particular years of our lives, when it comes to the 12th house being activated in annual perfections, it always feels, you feel alone during those years. A lot of people struggle because it's like you're faced with yourself, your true self. A lot of people don't like who they really are, or don't even know who they really are. So when it comes to those particular years of our lives, and I did elaborate a lot more about this in my video for Annual Perfections that I made several months ago, but it's very important that during those transits, during Saturn transit, during those years, that we are focusing on our space, on ourselves, on our spirituality, on our inner peace. What's going to bring us inner peace? Saturn coming through this house is going to show us more about how we can dive deeper into finding peace within ourselves. Now, because the 12th house links us towards endings, things finishing, when it comes into the 12th house, it's kind of saying to you, look, you need to put something to a close here. I don't recommend starting something brand new, like a brand new project. However, if there is a new feeling that you have, or this new idea that you have in terms of you having more inner peace, or more being more spiritually grounded, I definitely recommend doing that during this transit. But I don't recommend like doing things that is going to be reflected on the outside world during this transit, because you actually don't want to do things for anybody else. It's not about others. Now, if I look back, I remember in my study return a couple of years ago, I had Saturn in my 12th house. And I remember it was so crazy. But during this transit, you are likely to experience having to kind of put your emotions to the side because someone is going to get sick. Yes. And I remember 2018, my boyfriend decided to go and have an operation. Yes, he decided because he had a fractured wrist, a very old fracture, but it was getting worse. And it happened to get worse as we got together. And I remember him going for the operation, having to bring him there, pick him up, nurse him back to health, cook all the time, clean all the time. And this was very early on into our relationship, you know. But I remember when Saturn came into my... And also, no one really knew what was going on. I didn't go out there and tell everyone, yes, my boyfriend is ill, everybody. And I didn't really let everyone know, because it wasn't really something I felt that I had to put out there. Didn't really see a point, really. And it was kind of easy. He wasn't a hard patient. But when Saturn comes into this house, you are going to be linked to having to take care of someone who needs assistance. So health issues, you know, even if it's not you, it could be someone else, there can be health issues. Saturn can, though, bring a health issue in here, and especially if you are experiencing the Saturn return. Saturn return happens every 28 to 30 years. And, you know, for you to have Saturn returning into this house, there can be a reminder to look after your health. So we can see like health issues, and I mean like chronic health issues, Crohn's disease, meningitis, like things that can be very damaging to the body, that can affect your mental health especially, but also the physical, you know, abilities, because obviously your brain kind of functions, or that your brain kind of, you know, controls the rest of the body and the maneuvers, things like that. But there can be an issue that can affect the whole body to be able to maneuver. So health-wise, you might decide to start taking your health a lot more seriously. During your Saturn return, it's a great time to start taking care of your health. You know, going to the hospital, making checkups, and you will probably experience hospital visits. But it's also about you taking responsibility of your health. What more can you do to support yourself, you know? And Saturn's literally just finished the transit going through your 11th house. And that's the house of friendships and social circles. And usually when Saturn goes through the 11th house, there can be a long-term friendship that ends for whatever reason. There could be grandparents who end up being quite sick. There could be something that can just feel like a loss. And you start to feel very alone, especially once Saturn goes into your 12th house. You just start to feel really lonely. But this is where we do a lot of self-work. The 12th house can be very self-sabotaging, you know? And when Saturn comes in here, you're supposed to face, why do I sabotage things? Am I a self-sabotager? There should be things that are going to pop up during this transit that you're going to be confronted with. And this is the thing, when it comes to Saturn returning, it's like you might always have this attachment towards doing drugs, having lots of alcohol, smoking, drinking, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be an addiction thing. It could literally just be having too much meat, red meat, or sugars. Whatever it is, there could be something that that can sabotage your body. And during this, and this can also be in terms of wanting to control your environment. You know, you being around a parent who is draining, mentally draining. Time to go. It's time for them to go, in terms of you kind of breaking the relationship off with them. But those things that sabotage you and drain you, it's time for you to take responsibility and no longer be a child about it. Take accountability and choose to walk away. That's the whole purpose of Saturn return, is that you are now about to approach 30, or you are 30. So it's time to make adult decisions. Do what is right for you. So people, that is my video for Saturn in the 12th house. I hope you guys have thoroughly enjoyed it. I will see you on the next one, people. Take care. Bye.